there are 7 coordinating capacities we intend to develop with our young players. The analytical method can only be utilized to develop the first 6 capacities. The spatial temporal perception can only be developed through the global and conditional methods. To develop coordination, we will employ 2 distinct approaches. The first approach involves utilizing circuits. In this instance, we employ a static circuit, wherein players do not transition between circuits, but rather modify or progress through them. When employing circuits, repetition or time can be employed as the mode of execution. I recommend consistently executing circuits using time, as it facilitates the management of cues. When employing repetitions, there is a risk of one group completing faster and remaining idle, or even a group that is slow in completing the activity and hindering others. By employing time to execute the activity, all groups will progress to the next repetitions or progressions in a synchronized manner. In this example, players perform coordination activities through a ladder, dribble the ball to the cones, return, jump over the hurdles, land on the ring, and execute a technical skill. Once the duration of the activity is reached, the stations are modified, and the progression is moved on to the next level. This process continues until all progressions have been completed. Circuits can also be performed in waves, where after completing a circuit for a given duration, players shift to the next circuit. This continues until all the stations are completed. Another type of circuit we can utilize to develop coordination is the box or grid circuit. Within the box, we perform specific technical skills, while outside the box, we work on various coordinating capacities. Notice how these types of activities employ contextual and non-contextual activities. In the next example, we can expand this circuit and make it more challenging by adding more training equipment on the outside of the grid. The greater the quantity of training equipment at your disposal, the more challenging and engaging the circuits you can design and implement. The second modality we are going to utilize are relay races. A relay race is a competition between 2 or more teams that go through an obstacle course. The first team to finish the course wins the game. When using relay races, we are always going to use the following format to execute it. In the first set, it is going to be non-contextual in nature, meaning players are not going to use a soccer ball. The first player goes through the obstacle course and gives a high five for the next player to go. During this first set, the objective is for players to familiarize themselves with the obstacle course and become aware what skills to use to overcome the course. We perform 3 to 5 repetitions during each of the sets. On the second set, players will carry a ball rugby style under their arms and hand it off to the next player in line once the course is ran. Now on the last and third set, we are going to use a soccer ball at the feet. In this example, players will dribble through the slalom pole, push the ball under the hurdle, jump over the hurdle, control the ball, and repeat on the next hurdle. Then the player has to go around the agility pole, run with the ball, and pass to the next player in line once the last agility pole is reached. Relay races are a superior approach to developing coordination due to the nature of the activity. Since this is a competition, players will be engaged and motivated to perform at the highest speed possible. And isn't this what we want to develop in our young players? Relay races, besides developing the coordinating capacities at high velocities, also develop psychological skills, such as the competitive will of athletes. Let's review another example. Here, we have the same setup, except we have changed the obstacle course. Relay races are really easy to set up, but will make your training sessions more fun and challenging. As a youth coach, understanding the different benefits these activities provide will allow you to create more balance and effective training sessions. All of the coordinating capacities are developed when using global and conditional activities. We can influence the degree of incidence by reducing or enlarging the field size. Small field sizes will have a huge impact on the development of the temporal space perception coordination, which is essential to playing the game of soccer at higher tempos. One of the differences between leagues at the youth level is the physical speed of players, which decreases the time players have to make decisions. Increased awareness will improve the decision process of our young players under match conditions. In Chapter 1, Lesson 2, we distinguish strength, endurance, and velocity as distinct entities. However, it is essential to recognize that these conditional capacities are not mutually exclusive, but rather exist on a spectrum within the realm of sports. Every sport movement involves strength, which serves as the central component. At one extreme lies strength endurance, and at the other, strength velocity or strength speed. What separates these two capacities is the level or intensity of muscle contractions. Strength endurance have a lower contractions force, and humans are designed for long-duration activities of low intensities. During strength speed, the contractions are so much powerful, and these high-intensity activities are what leads to fatigue during match conditions, as humans cannot maintain these types of contractions for long duration. But there is one more relationship we must establish. That is the relationship between strength and agility. Agility is nothing more than the use of force or strength to change direction and move the body as quickly as possible, while incorporating all or most of the coordinating capacities. This diagram, with strength as the center of sports performance, is required in order to design and implement a proper strength and conditioning program for our young players. Now, we can engage in the design of training activities to develop the conditional capacities. The development of strength follows a continuum that goes from general strength to sport-specific strength. General strength training is the development of all muscle groups in the body and serve as the foundation for sport-specific strength. Sport-specific strength training aims to develop muscle force production as required by the sport itself and the position played by the athlete. Often the development of general strength is neglected in youth training, which leads to suboptimal game performance and leads to a lack of confidence in young players. To develop general strength, we are going to use circuits once again. To ensure that all muscle groups are developed correctly and to avoid creating muscle imbalances, we will use the following exercise sequence. The circuits will always be composed of a lower body, upper body, and core exercises. By repeating this pattern, we can create more extensive circuits that can accommodate large group of players. In order to avoid redundancy and extra work, we can simply reuse the same circuits used to develop the coordinating capacities. This first example is the same we used to develop coordination. We just added strength training exercises at the beginning of the circuit. And we can do the same with grid circuits as shown in the next example. And just as easily, you have a vast array of training circuits you can use with your young players. To develop sports-specific strength using the analytical method, we are going to use the HIT protocol. HIT stands for high-intensity interval training. For our purposes, we will use a 1-to-1 work-to-rest ratio. In the first example, after passing the ball, players sit and quickly get up. We work for 30 seconds and rest for 30 seconds. Sitting down and quickly getting up mimics situations of the game where a player falls down and has to get back on his feet. On the second example, after passing the ball, players sprint around the cone. The sprint around the cone resembles a player anticipating the pass from the opponent or just checking in prior to receiving the ball. In both of these exercises, the strength developed is specific to the game of soccer. When we use the global and the conditional method, all of the strength developed during these activities are sport-specific. To make the design process easier, we will use the following activities table. The first table provides you with a list of activities, their respective field size, number of players, and the work-to-rest ratio. The second table provides you with a variety of specific measurements that meets the criteria of small, medium, and large-size fields. No more guessing as to what size to make your fields. Global method. To develop sports-specific strength using the global method, we will utilize activity C, 2v2, 3v3, in a small size field. Table 2, field size, gives the option of up to 3 field sizes. Use the max field size for younger players to provide them the room necessary to carry out the task correctly. For older, more experienced players, use the minimum size field, which will require faster speed of play, both physically and cognitively. If you are wondering why these activities develop strength, it has a simple answer. Change of direction. The reduced size of the field forces players to constantly change direction, and this creates a constant overload on lower body muscles, and hence, the development of bigger and stronger muscles. Conditional method. To develop strength using the conditional method, activities C, D, E, F can be used. Examples of activity C: 1v1 continuous, 2v2 to 2 goals, 3v3 2 touch max. Activity D: 1v1 plus goalkeeper, 2v2, 3v3 with scoring zones. Activity E: 1v1, 2v2, 3v3 with attack to defense transition. Activity F: use small size fields in one direction. To properly develop velocity, we must use short, medium, and long distances. The longer the distance covered, the greater the force production required to move the body at high speed. Although is not as apparent, velocity training develops very strong core muscles. The stronger the core muscles are, the stronger the player will be. The following example develops velocity in all three distances. Players will sprint 20 meters, jog back, and then continue until all distances are covered. As coaches, we all have carried out these type of non-contextual training activities. And yes, these training activities are valid and useful. But training the physical component along with the other sports components is more economical and long-term will yield better results. The first example is a simple 1v1 situation with the objective to develop velocity. The attacker dribbles the ball around the cone as fast as possible and finish in mini-goal. The defender sprints around the cone to stop the attacker. If we group players in teams, we now make it a competition. Notice how by just adding a few elements to this activity, we can manipulate more training variables, leading to a more holistic training environment. Second example is very similar to the first one, but now we add a little bit of reaction work to the activity. The coach will call out a color that the defender must round before entering the field. By placing 2 goals, it gives the attacker the ability to change direction and direct the attack through the open space. The third example now combines the different types of distances the player can cover. The coach call out a color and each player but sprint around it before entering the field. The players that gains possession of the ball becomes the attacker and can finish in either goal. The other player defends. In the fourth example, we combine velocity training with an attacking pattern. We want our young players to be fast, but with a purpose. These type of training engages player more than simply doing sprints, as they can connect it to the actual game. The objective of all our training activities is to always transfer skills into match conditions. The more our training activities meet the principle of specificity, the greater the transfer rate we can achieve. No speed training program can be complete without incorporating agility training. The most common method to develop agility is to sprint from cone to cone. This type of exercises are normally called closed agility training, since we remove the outside stimulus. And since we do not want to break the trend, let's make agility training more soccer-specific. Agility training is nothing more than training the transitions in soccer. Yes, you heard correctly. Anytime you train the attack to defense transition or vice versa, you are training agility. Don't believe it yet? Let's take a look at some examples. Example 1. The player dribbles the ball and finishes into a small goal, then quickly transitions into defense. Upon passing the cone, another player on the opposite side starts the attack. The first player chases and tries to stop the opponent from scoring, and then the second player transitions into defense, and so on. So where is the agility in this activity? Every time a player changes direction, he is developing agility, which requires strength and coordination. And all transitions during a game of soccer requires change of direction. Example 2 is a conditional game of 2v2 with transitions. After finishing on the big goal, the players must quickly transition into defense, taking into account the next wave of attackers. This requires a quick change of mindset, change of direction, and adaptation to the opponents. What about the global and conditional methods? From the activities table, which will create the greatest change of direction. That's right. Activities C, D, E, and F can all be used to develop agility. In the past, the approach to developing endurance was to perform slow, long-distance running around a field. What type of training is this? Correct. This is a non-contextual type of training, And although it will develop endurance, it is not specific to our sport, since our players do not run in a cyclical pattern. Endurance must be developed incorporating all the stops and turns the game has, and with reference to teammates, opponents, the ball, and the absence or presence of the whistle. Running laps makes it easy to quantify the volume of training, but we can do better. We can design analytical activities to develop endurance while simultaneously developing technical or tactical skills. In the first example, two players pass and combine the length of the field. The total distance traveled is approximately 180 meters. If we repeat this 10 times, we have a total of 1,800 meters, which is equivalent to 1 mile and a bit more. Since we are using a soccer ball to control, dribble, and pass the ball, this creates an acyclical activity, which is precisely what we want to develop. Here is another pattern of passing with an overlap. The player in possession dribbles the ball diagonally. Meanwhile, his partner performs an overlap and receives the pass from his teammate. The pattern is then repeated until the length of the field is covered. In this exercise, the total distance in each repetition is about 180 meters. Both of these activities will develop endurance, along with other technical, tactical skills. To develop endurance using the global method, we can use activities A and B. For the 8v8, 9v9 games, you need almost 3/4 of the field, 60 by 45 meters. Unfortunately, one of the many challenges of coaching youth soccer is the availability of field space, so playing 8v8, 9v9 may not be possible. If you have at least half the field space to train, then you can do 7v7 games. If you only have a quarter of the field, then only activity B is possible, where you can play 4v4 or 5v5. But in order for endurance to be truly developed, players must cover as much distance as possible, and often this is not the case. During the attacking phase, the team must move as one block. Do not allow defenders to stay back, otherwise they miss out on properly developing their endurance. And the opposite is true during the defensive recoveries, as attackers begin to develop the bad habit of not getting compact. Besides the impact on their tactical discipline, this type of low effort will yield very poor results, and long-term your players will not be able to keep up with the demands of the competition. As a youth coach, it is imperative that your players move as one unit during these games, not just from a tactical advantage, but to properly develop all the physical characteristics your players need. Built this habit from the very first day of practice. In the last 20 years, the new age in computers has allowed sports scientists to conduct better research into the development of athletic fitness. One of the fascinating finds in sports research has been the link between mental training and fitness development. The first research had two groups exercise on a stationary bike. The first group just performed the activity on the bike. The second group also had to click letters that appeared on a computer screen. At the end of the training regime, both groups had similar improvements in endurance, as measured by their VO2 max. But when they did an exhaustion test between the two groups, the second group performed better. In other words, the second group had a greater tolerance to training at higher intensities. The second research had three groups. The first group had physical training only. The second group performed physical training plus mental imagery, and the third group item to group 2, plus self-motivational talk. The results were astounding, providing evidence that pairing cognitive tasks with physical activities is a superior method to fitness training. The conditional method provides the opportunity to implement brain endurance training with our young soccer players. By carefully introducing conditions, players will have to be aware of the variables introduced in the game of soccer, leading to improved development of endurance. All the activities from A to F can be used with the conditional method. All we have to do is impose a condition on the game, and we have brain endurance training. Let's explore a few examples. In this game, players have the following condition: no more than 2 passes in a given channel. Then, we can progress by adding another condition. Players cannot pass the ball back from the channel where the ball came from. With these two conditions in effect, our young players need to concentrate not just on the elements of the game, but also how many passes are given in a given channel and to what channel the ball can be played into. In the next example, we have another game of 7v7 with 3 zones. In the middle zone, players are limited to 1 touch and 3 touches on lateral zones. Having zones with different maximum amount of touches, places a high cognitive load and requires players to be constantly concentrating, both narrow and broad, in particular when the ball moves into the middle zone. When the ball goes into the middle zone, players must quickly support the receiver and be able to combine correctly and progress into the final zone to finish the attack. On Chapter 6, we will review many more variables we can use to create conditional games.